Welcome to AVoice for Creators. I'm your host, Daniel Norton. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about destroying what we create. So I was part of a chat the other day. It was actually for gaming creators, but one of the people posted that they often feel like they want to go back and look at the things they've done in the past and tear them down and get rid of them and redo them and that kind of stuff because they didn't feel like they liked them anymore, or maybe they're in a different space. There was lots of reasons. It was a whole chat, but this is the basic. And they posted a picture of this book, which I now have on order. So I haven't read it yet, but it's a biography of Picasso, and it's called Picasso, Creator and Destroyer. And I just thought, wow, that's such a great name. And I know, it's been a while since I've been to art school, but I do know that Picasso had his different periods where he would just be almost like a completely different artist, like he just started over. I'm not sure that he destroyed the other stuff, but I guess I'll read the biography. But I do think this is super interesting, especially in a world where we put ourselves out there digitally and it can remain forever. So my background primarily, as talked about before, is as a fashion photographer, and much of my commercial work is in catalogs and stuff. And I'm sure somewhere somebody has some of these catalogs or old magazines that have the pictures and stuff in them. But I can tell you that the vast majority of images that I shot in my career are no longer really in circulation. That is, they're not readily available for people to find. I mean, I have them, of course. I have archives and such, but it's not like they're out there. Now, there are some photographers, of course, who throughout their career, because they took very famous pictures or certain pictures they took became very famous, those pictures are still out there. But most of us, unless we do a book or something like that, or a retrospective, our images from our past go away, on some level. But this is changing. And it has been changing for, I don't know, maybe 15 years, 10 years, where things like Flickr and 500 pixels and these kind of Tumblr, I guess, these kind of things where people will post pictures that they're working on, and then they will just kind of be there. And because there's no real limit to how many pictures in many of the places we can put, they're just out there. Like, why would we ever take a picture off Instagram or off Flickr if we didn't need to? And that's the attitude that many of us take. Now, it is true that a lot of people curate these things, especially people who focus their business on it. If you are an Instagram influencer, I guarantee that you probably go on there and remove pictures steadily that aren't doing well or that don't reflect what you're doing now, or because you don't want too many pictures or whatever reason you might do it. I remember there used to be a hashtag that people would put something like take down later or temporary or something like that, where they would put pictures up. And I kind of feel like that was a gimmick to get people to want to look at them right away, because if you don't check my page every day, you might not see these pictures because they're going to be taken down. But there's something to that, right? There's something to the idea that we're always putting fresh pictures out. And if I think about my portfolio as a fashion photographer, right, it only had my most recent stuff. Who cares if I shot a magazine cover 5 years ago? Not the person who's hiring me today. They want to know, did I shoot one today? That's what matters. Or at least that's what did matter. Now, with these massive archives, people look back and they almost see it as a history. If they look at your page and they only see 5 or 10 images, which is what they would have seen, maybe not 5, but 10, 15 images, they might think, has this person ever done anything? So you almost want this archive of pictures from the past, your past successes, to be out there. But what if you start looking back at them and they're just not you anymore? What if you've moved on? What if you've changed? What if that doesn't represent you anymore and you feel like you don't want people to see them? And I'm not talking about because they're not technically good, because usually when these conversations come up, people will mention, oh yeah, my old work was very cringy and I didn't have good lighting. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the idea that when we're artists, we put our heart, our soul, who we are into our images. At least some of us do. And if who we are changes, do we want that old self out there representing us? I mean, there's a lot of reasons to not leave it out there. Things like if somebody sees those really old pictures and wants to hire you because of them, you might not be that person anymore. You might not create those images anymore. And I don't mean technically, but I'm talking about emotionally and powerfully and with your connection to your subject. You just might not be there anymore. And you ideally, you're better, I'm air quoting, but again, you're not that. Or even if it's a technique, maybe you don't want to do that technique because it's like, oh God, really, like cross-processing or whatever, blue smoke or whatever the heck is people popular, prisms. I don't want to do that. That's cheesy because you did it back then because it was trendy and it was what was going on. But now it's like, whew, cringe, right? So there is that. You don't want to do it because it's cringy, but there's also you're not that person anymore. And that's really what I want to address here. So when we look back at our archives, do we want to curate them to possibly show the path that led from where we were to the path of where we are? Or maybe I should rephrase it as, we should curate them to do that, as opposed to just wiping it out. Because if I look back 10 years and I see images that I shot, I might not be that person anymore. So do I want people to see me as that person? And this is a whole other thing, is if you do want that and you can't be that person, and that's terrible too. That's like a whole other podcast. But yeah, I mean, do I want people to be like, oh, you shot that? Like, oh, you were involved in that, or oh, you did this? Maybe I don't want that there. But there are images that were created during that period that were the stepping stone, the path, the process that got you to who you are now. So perhaps instead of creating, and then destroying, it should be creating, and then curating. This, I think, might be a good middle ground. We can remove some things, but we don't want to erase what was there, because who we were is directly what led to who we are. And I think that's just really important. I think there's a fine balance here. We don't want to fall back on who we were in almost like nostalgia, like, oh, those were the days. You know, don't you know who I am? I did this thing 5 years ago. Nobody really cares about that. Maybe some people do. They want to know what you're doing now, right? Like Janet Jackson, right? What have you done for me lately? That's what people want to know. But we don't want to erase that like we never existed, because that was part of us. And it is a balance. It's a balance of remembering, living, and looking to the future. And if we can balance that out, that's how we can have positive movement as artists, as creators, as people, really. So I would love to hear what you think about this. You can send me an email, avoice@dnphoto.com. That is in the description. You could also join the Discord, also in the description. Jump into the AVoice channel. Let's chat. If you'd like to support the podcast on Patreon, there will be a link to that in the description as well. The other great way you can support the podcast is to rate and review it on the podcatcher of your choice. Also share it around with anybody that you might know that might be interested in this. Put it on all your social media. I appreciate it. Get this thing out there. Let's grow this community together, and I'll talk to you soon.